just want to get started a little bit on who I am, what I do, and how I got here. Real quick, I don't want to spend a lot of time, just to show the position I am in a global market right now with EVs. So we're doing lots of different things with the companies I'm involved with. And one of the big things is that we're developing training, curriculum, products, innovation with a company called Consulab. That's a company I work for. I'm an education specialist with their education team. And we got some really cool products, and it doesn't end with EVs. I like how everyone comes up with EVs, and that's what the big focus is. But there's a lot of new technologies coming in, and not just with the high voltage systems. We're talking about H2 with hydrogen being introduced in a lot of areas. California is very prominent in getting up in speed, and we're seeing it starting to come into Canada now, as well as we have ADAS systems becoming more advanced, different types of ADAS systems out there. So, all these technologies, you guys can hear that there? I'm not used to using a mic, so we're hearing a lot of different technologies within the automotive industry. So, and my company, Powered EV, was started from looking back at how we got started with electric vehicles. One of the big things I had when I left NSCC, which is a community college, which I had worked for 12 years as an automotive customized trainer, doing training for the aftermarket industry. That included auto collision, included AST, automotive service repair, and truck and transport. And I saw a shift with the government. That's what made me jump from NSCC as an instructor for over 12 years to starting my own company, which was called All EV Canada. And within 1 year, actually within 8 months, we had 2 dealerships, and our focus wasn't selling electric vehicles. It was the service and repair. And at the beginning, I was buying smashed, damaged, wrote-off electric vehicles. And I probably purchased well over 60 plus of these vehicles, which we stripped down, we sold off the parts, we were rebuilding, and then we realized the education was needed in the industry. So from that, we continued to build and innovate some of these products. About 6 months ago, I left the Steel Auto Group, who actually purchased us, back in 2021, and I started my own company as well called Powered EV, which I work directly with OEMs. I work directly at ground level factory, production of electric vehicles in North America and in Europe. So I'm traveling. In fact, I was in the parking lot this morning talking to one of our clients in Dubai, and it's about 6 hour difference there. So some mornings I'm up at 3 in the morning doing calls and doing consulting with them on different aspects with electric vehicles. But today's session I'm here to talk about isn't about who I am and what I do. It's about helping understand what it takes to get into the electric vehicle world for service and repair. My course, Integration of Electric Vehicles into Your Workshop, I've done this program several times in the US and 4 different associations, as well as groups and individual shops that were interested in getting into electric vehicles. So this is a quick expert from a very larger course, and this course is actually about 3 hours long. And it's really interesting because the questions that come out from this course. So if you have any questions as I go through, please ask. My presentation is very picture. I like pictures in the auto collision industry. It's all about the finished product. And I believe in the side, what I like is I like to see the finished product. I like to see people succeed, information that I can share from my experience with our shops and our work and the things that we do and develop. If it can help out, definitely see me after today's session, or email me or look me up on LinkedIn. It's funny because somebody says, why do you keep using the same picture every time on your speaker note? Because that's my LinkedIn picture. So when somebody punches in Dave Giles, they're not looking for something that's really odd looking. So they see my picture up there and you can actually connect. And I will answer questions if you want to contact me at any time on any aspects of those electric vehicles or even transportation technology that's out there. So one of the great quotes I like to see is, we will see more changes in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 50 in the automotive service industry, whether it be with truck and transport, automotive, or in collision. We're seeing a rapid acceleration of changes. And this is something that's why we're here today, because we know that these changes are important for the life of our business. And that's why I'm here. I'm not here to tell you about, all the training and all that's out there, because everybody knows that. But how can I be profitable with, doing this type of electric vehicle service? How can I be safe doing it? And what are the opportunities that this service can allow? So that's kind of things where I go. Electrification is not a threat, but it is an opportunity to excel in what you're capable of doing and the resources that are out there to help you succeed on that. And just give you a quick example here. I got this little, oops, I don't know if it'll play. See if it'll come up here. No, it might not play. But this is something that essentially, that's a Tesla with 2,200 kilometers on it that we cut the body off of. So even if we were an auto service repair center selling used cars, we knew that adoption was very important. And that adoption is not about selling cars and about, making the pricing right, but it was having the service and repair available. And that was the key. And, places like collision shops, auto service shops, and so on are critical life to that adoption. When I was in Ottawa just last week, and I was talking to one of the MPs, and that was my thought, is that, you can give all these incentives to buy cars and do this, but really we need a network that can fix these vehicles. Dealerships aren't available everywhere around. So we need these resources with local independent facilities that can service and repair these vehicles. And this is what, and he says, he goes like, well, isn't that natural? Don't they just learn this stuff automatically? And obviously somebody that doesn't know the industry very well. And I said, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of resources, and takes a lot of time to do and learn new technology, especially as fast as it's coming today. And this is where we're looking at right now. So the opportunities that are out there are fast and furious, coming at us at a rapid rate. And to be able to adjust to get to be able to do these services is going to take some investment. And that investment comes from, the facilities, because if that's all we have, then we have to spend the time, do the training, buy the equipment, and so on in electric vehicles. So we have to be strategic in doing it. And that's what All EV did. When I was with All EV, when I first started, we had to have a strategy and how we were going to market ourselves. We couldn't just put up cars and sell cars. We had to have the service and repair, and doing so, train our people. We had technicians that were working with us, even when Tesla came to our center, to use our center for their service and warranty work. Yes, they actually did. They came because we were in Atlantic Canada. There was nobody else out there. And from there, they said that we were doing stuff that they've never seen before. And we weren't doing anything unusual, just they didn't do it on the road. We did batteries, motor drive units. We did, swap outs and leafs. So we were rebuilding, vehicles in a sense to repurpose them for other uses, especially in the education world. So the big question is, what services do you offer now? And this is what happens. A lot of people say, I want to get into servicing electric vehicles. I want to get into help, to be able to bring them in and be safe at doing it. But what services are you doing now? What services is electric vehicles going to change in your business? These are still cars. They're still regular vehicles. The Kona is a perfect example of that. I could park a Kona gas, ice-powered vehicle right beside that vehicle, and essentially it's just the powertrain that's different. There's a few body changes and stuff like that on the vehicle, but it's still the same materials, the same build, and so on with that vehicle. And then somebody said, well, what about the battery? And that's where it comes down to the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room with electric vehicles is the high voltage systems. Everybody gets fearful with the high voltage systems in the vehicle. And I'll tell you right now, the likelihood of you servicing or fixing a high voltage battery in a modern today's vehicle is very, very low. And there's lots of reasons for that. One, the battery technology is very good in today's vehicles. So if you're an AST shop and you're, want to get into battery rebuilding, other than nickel metal hydride batteries of the older hybrid vehicles, maybe some leaf in that is very limited. These batteries on some of these vehicles are 160,000+ kilometers, 8-year warranty on them. So if you're looking for wore out batteries to start being able to offer a service to rebuild them, it's going to be a long time. And at that time, you have to look at the battery's life. Batteries are measured by what we call cycle times. I work with Dalhousie University at the RESL lab as well. I've been doing work with them since 2010. Lucas Swan, as well as Jeff Dunn. Jeff Dunn, you may hear that name once in a while. He's a battery scientist working from Dell as well. But the RESL lab, which is the Renewable Energy Storage Lab, what they do is they take batteries and test them. And they have a cycler there that they can cycle through. Sherbrooke University as well. I've worked with them in some batteries with them and supplying them packs and so on and information about it. And the cycle time of these batteries is incredible. 2,000+ cycles on a battery, which means that this battery can be fully charged and discharged over 2,000 times. If that vehicle gets a range of 400 kilometers, with 2,000, you're looking at 800,000 kilometers on that battery pack. Even if the car only gets 60% of usable, charge on that vehicle, you're still over 650,000 kilometers, which means that that car is probably, going to wear out before the battery. So the battery in itself is not a big concern in the servicing and repair of it. It's about the safety around the vehicle and the battery system. So talking about the service you're offering now, if you're not looking at getting a battery servicing and tear down and rebuilding and so on, it's just another powertrain device. In fact, the gas tank has loads more energy in it than a battery itself. So, 1 gallon of gasoline has tons and tons of kilowatt hours of energy in 1 gallon of gasoline. It's incredible how much energy is there compared to an electric vehicle. The only difference is, electric vehicles are very efficient compared to gasoline that wastes a lot of its energy through combustion and heat. So these are just a quick couple of pictures there of what we do to some of these cars, and tear them down and, take them apart and do our research and build and reverse engineer in some cases, which I'm not allowed talking about. But anyways, so this is some of the stuff that we were doing within our shops. So the other thing is EV knowledge. If you want to get into working with electric vehicles, and one thing that comes up all the time is the lingo. You got to understand the customers that will buy electric vehicles. When a customer buys an electric vehicle, they've already done the research. So a lot of them are, savvy. They belong to groups in the media or in the social media side. They're already researching about their vehicles. They know their vehicles. They know a lot of the different terminology in the vehicle. They know, what range they're going to get, size of the battery they have, even sometimes the kilowatt power their car has. They have all those details. And when they walk into a shop, and the shop, they don't even know how to turn the vehicle on. They don't even know how to drive it. They don't know how to handle the vehicle. And that brings in the intimidation factor. And that's what it is about these vehicles. And the EV side is about the intimidation, the fear that they are brought about. When you look at training courses and they're talking, you see guys in arc flash protection and they're wearing the gloves, the smocks, the boots, they have the pads around, they have the cars all put out, and then you ask them, what are you doing? You say, well, I'm doing a tire rotation. It's an electric vehicle, we have to be safe. And, so you have to manage what is actually being done. And one of the things I do talk about when we do training is what services do you want to do what you're doing now? Because obviously, if you're going to be doing battery repair, you're going to be doing high voltage service, whether air conditioning on a smashed vehicle that you have to remove the high voltage AC compressor, you have to disable the high voltage system, then you're going to need your PPE to relate to those types of services. So you have to have your PPE to do that. But if you're not doing those services, if your shop is just doing, basic services in the sense of maybe detailing or even, If you're an auto service shop that's doing tires and basic maintenance to a vehicle and you're not touching high voltage, you technically don't need all this PPE equipment unless you're going to touch the high voltage system. But how do you know? And you will know by training. So training becomes the number one thing with vehicles, is basically knowing what to do and how to handle them. So how do you get there when you are here? And this is a big thing I talk about in the training side, is that we need to have the information available to us. Sessions like this where you can come and talk to others that may be already doing vehicle service on electric vehicles, talking with others that may have encountered some challenges with electric vehicles. These types of events are really, really great for doing those types of work. Because the thing is, I get calls all the time. Trust me, I get calls all the time globally. Even this morning, I had a couple of calls for asking about a EV service on an older hybrid Ford Escape. And, once again, it's like, because they're looking for resources, looking for it. And a lot of times I said, have you done any training on high voltage? Have you done any training available to you, whether local community college or, online training or even aftermarket training that's out there that's coming on fast as well, too. So, getting prepared, getting that information and knowing how to position yourself, especially when you're doing EV service. So education training, I've done training with the side of, specific manufacturers to, services in the sense of high voltage, vehicle specific, but also, going into the US, we think that the US might be a lot further ahead of us than others. And you'd be very surprised. When I went down to the US and I did a class down there, I actually had two of them. Both of them were sold out. There was over 180 shops at both these events. And I was actually very nervous because I was talking about, bringing in the business, bringing in the EVs. How do you do that? What are you going to be looking for? What are some of the equipment, some of the challenges, some of the training you're going to need? And in fact, a lot of them hadn't even touched an EV in their shops. So, so they were looking for that information to do it. So, and like no different here for some of the shops here. Some shops here may have already done some EV service and so on, repaired EV vehicles. And, maybe you called somebody else in to have them disconnect the high voltage service, disconnect on the vehicle, maybe had them disconnect stuff. And there's really no need, once you get the training and understand what you need to do, you can actually do that right in your own shop, not giving away that work. So, once again, clinics and that are around, I really highly encourage taking those types of, clinics and so on. Currently right now, I don't know if Greg Morrison's here. See here? Oh, and CSA, I'm working with CSA right now on 3 projects. One of them is auto service technician, high voltage certification training. The other one is on EVEMS, which is energy management systems for MURBs and sub-multi-unit residential buildings and so on, as well as there's a new one coming in as truck and transport. Now, I'm not saying that the collision industry isn't on their radar, but this is an association that's putting standards in place so they can be identified by technicians that want to challenge their exams and training to become that certified, to have that certification, to understand that they need a standard within Canada for that type of certification. So that's supposed to be launched this fall. We're just talking about it now. It's almost completed. And several colleges are involved with that right across Canada. In fact, there's some of the OEMs in the US as well too. So what's next? So what do you do next? What are some of the things that are important for you, owner, whether it's collision or auto service repair, or even now into the truck and transport, is to prepare your shop for EV service. One of the simplest things you can do is chargers. It's no good having a vehicle that can come into your shop and you can't charge it for whatever reason, or even have a charge in it. Plus, it also puts a statement. Trust me, I'm on probably over 40 social media groups, and within those groups, when I see a shop put up a couple chargers on their building, right away, somebody in that community will say, hey, do you know ABC Automotive just put some chargers, level 2 chargers on their building? They must be ready for EVs. They must understand them. They're part of our culture. And sometimes even just that little thing can really be a big marketing thing for a shop just by the charging network itself. The other thing is too is preparing your technicians. You know, the technicians need to be trained. Number one investment, like I said earlier, is in the training itself. So making sure they're trained and make sure they have the information as well to be able to do that service work. So you see there's a lot of exciting things happening within the industry, and not just on the new car, used car, service side, but even on the parts side as well too. It's affecting everything all over. So anyways, I'd like to thank you very much. I will be around if you have any questions, as well as the integration of electric vehicles is actually an online course. There's no charge for it. It will be available. If you go to my LinkedIn page, we'll have it up probably in September. One of the associations putting up. It's about 3 modules. It's very involved, very detailed. So, but once again, if you're looking at getting specific information, you can ask me after the session today, or join me on one of the webinars that we're going to be doing. Thank you.
We can skip that picture. All right. There are 2 types of batteries. This is just basically battery 101. 2 types of batteries are single use and rechargeable. Single use are what you see on the screen. They're alkaline, your basic AA, AAA, C, Ds, and so on. Lithium primary, which are the little button cells you see in watches, remote control, garage door openers, things like that. And then the rechargeable are obviously the lithium ion that's current, older nickel metal hydride, NiCad, and so on. So these are found in laptops, reusable products, your razor and whatnot. This is a category that EV batteries fall into as well because they are rechargeable. A little bit of history. The rise of EVs, it started way back quite a while ago. And if you guys remember back in the 70s, the fuel crisis or whatnot, so all the brains got together. Let's see what we can do with electrified vehicles. Fast forward to the 90s, and as David mentioned, the older NiCad vehicles like the Leafs and the Priuses out there started that evolution. And now we're pushing the boundaries with lithium ion. There's a few OEMs out there playing with solid state, but there's a lot of other news coming down the pipe. And I just wanted to put this out there on the evolution of what's going on. The last bullet point here, where it notes that, and what David touched on about the length and duration and the longevity of EV batteries, it's unknown right now, but based on what David shared with you and what we're seeing out in the marketplace, they're lasting a lot longer than what OEMs are publishing. Meaning they're not coming back that fast for end of life. So what is coming back? And that's the question. It's going to be more damaged, defective, things that would occur during the course of the life of the battery. Now, of course, a presentation is not good with any bar charts. I'm going to skip through this because David's already covered this off in his presentation. But basically, it's outlining the rapid growth of EVs, the adoption and the penetration in the Canadian marketplace. But also the one point I want to highlight here is second one. The critical materials that's required to build these batteries. The lithium, there's not enough lithium to supply demand. And this is why the recycling portion of it is that much more critical, and I'm going to be touching upon what we do there. So a quick snippet about what we do. We are a not-for-profit stewardship organization that supports diverting batteries from landfill, recycling, repurposing, and reusing everything that we can. The single-use batteries, which is our household and whatnot, we recover that and send as much to recycling as we can. The rechargeable households as well, same story. Where it gets interesting with EVs, because they're all generally lithium ion and precious minerals in there, what we try to do is we collect all those and send it off to repurpose first, reuse where we can, and then recycle if nothing else is possible with that. That's basically what we do. We support all provinces that are currently regulated with extended producer responsibility. And right now, the provinces that are regulated in Canada include BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and PEI. We just heard earlier this week, Nova Scotia is fast tracking their regulations and will be launched July of 24. So a little under a year from now. And then right behind that, you have Alberta and New Brunswick coming on board, and Yukon and the territories right after that. The expectation is by 2026, all of Canada will be regulated with battery regulations. So what does that mean, and how does it affect everybody in this room and beyond on recycling batteries? The first step is identifying what the EV battery is. There's different vehicles. Very interested to look at the Rivian later on and maybe drive a Frank. Identify what it is, identify the vehicle, identify the battery type, confirm that the battery is not defective. This is a very important point that I want to share here, and I'll expand on this in a later slide. You have to confirm that it's not defective or damaged before you do anything or touch it and operate on the vehicle. And once that it's all safe and you have no purpose for it, we can help with the logistics of picking it up and taking it to end states. The way it works right now is what happens to the EV battery. I'm going to spend a little bit of time sharing with you. So it comes to repair shop, whether it's yours or a dealer or whatnot. You assess it, you decide, or the professional, the technician decide it's reusable. You can remanufacture part of the battery. You can resale the battery as is if the vehicle is completely gone. We repurpose it or we send it to recycling, like I mentioned earlier. What we do, and as part of our mandate, is we are also Transport Canada certified equivalency certificate that we can pick up and transport hazardous materials. And that's one of the benefits that we are offering to anybody that wants to get rid of their battery. The key here is safety, and David touched on this. And the safety precautions are very critical. Yesterday, we had the opportunity of spending time with 300 firefighters as they were trying to assess how they deal with collision and damaged EVs on the road. And the interesting thing about EV batteries are that just by eyeballing it, oftentimes you can't tell if it's damaged or defective, and it gets really tricky. You have to look at if there's any gases escaping. Is it cracked? Is it dented? Is there any punctures? Is there any water damage? Things like that, that oftentimes when the normal ICE vehicles come into a shop, you can see where the damage is. It's not so bad. EV vehicles gets a little bit tricky because a little fender bender could have damaged a couple of the cells within the battery module, which can lead to a cascading effect. So identifying whether it's damaged, identifying whether it's defective is very critical first and foremost for the safety of everybody in your shop or in the vicinity. There was a incident, I want to say a month and a half or so ago, down in New Jersey, where one defective battery went unnoticed, and there were 5 different buildings in that area, and it started lighting it up like dominoes, and the entire facility went up in flames. And it's probably close to $1 million cost in just clearing it out, let alone repairing and rebuilding that facility. So it's very tricky because what looks to the naked eye can be very misleading. And again, I don't want to go contrary to what David's saying and go doom and gloom. It's very dangerous. It's not if you take the proper precautions. So our recommendation that we're sharing with all the stakeholders out there is, if an EV comes in for a collision damage repair, ideally you separate it out from everything else that you have in your lot. Keep it outside if it's not visible to the naked eye what the damage is, and if there's a concern. Yesterday, Toronto Fire shared with us an incident where they had a small scooter, electric scooter battery, and it looked perfectly fine. There was no fire or smoke coming out. 2 weeks later, it blew and started catching flames because there was a damage inside that wasn't visible. So there are concerns that way. A couple of things that we are recommending is a very affordable version of a thermal sensor to see what's going on behind inside the battery pack. That might facilitate you seeing any issues going on with the battery. There's also gas meters and whatnot, because EV batteries, if they are damaged, or defective, they will start emitting some gas that's dangerous, which is why we're recommending keeping it outside, open air, separated from everything else until you're absolutely sure that there is nothing wrong with it. The proper handling and transportation is very important as well. And later on, if you'd like to come to our booth, we can share with you some of the details. We have options and solutions that we can help facilitate or put you in touch with other organizations that can provide containers and other material that can help facilitate safe transport out of your lots if it is proven to be damaged or defective. Now, I'm going to touch briefly on where we are with the EV program. So about a little over a month ago, we launched a program with the Quebec government. They were the first province to launch an EV recovery program. The website is evbatteryrecovery.ca. It is run by the OEMs, and their intent was any EV that for their vehicles, wherever it is in the country, quite frankly, they will help recover and bring back. Now, right now, they're working with dealerships primarily because that's where the bulk of the vehicles are returning to. And what they're doing is the evbatteryrecovery.ca website allows them to, it's a collective with the OEMs, the global automakers and the CVMA, where you can input data and all the details of any battery or vehicle that's come back that you're concerned about that you want off your lot, and we facilitate the recovery of that for them on their behalf. I share this with you because while it is OEM driven, it is available to anybody out there that wants EVs taken away off their lot or removed, taken downstream to a recycler. That website allows anybody to input the detail and contact us, and we'll help facilitate that. We are getting about one a week right now from non-dealers who are concerned that, hey, I've got an EV that came into my lot, it's damaged. I don't know what to do with it. I can't do anything with it. I just want to get it off the lot. I know I can't touch the battery. Can you help out? And then they go through this process, and we're facilitating that. So there are options available to dealers and auto repair shops where you can't, where the EV battery is damaged to a point or defective that you can reuse it and repurpose it. So basically, the goal here is to provide safe logistical transport and removal of batteries that are unwanted. You guys are the experts in the auto repair world, and if it looks like it can't be repaired, it just came onto your lot and you want the battery off your lot, that's something that we can facilitate and help out with. We are national, cross country. We can support any of that. And again, worst case, if there's other questions about the EV battery itself, we can facilitate that dialogue and connect you with the right people to get you going on that. Again, like I said, we're a not-for-profit. We're here to service the industry in repurposing and recycling batteries. At the very end of the line where you can't repurpose, you can't reuse, it's completely gone, we will make all efforts to take it to a recycler where they will recapture the precious minerals and put it back into the stream and truly create a circular economy that way. So that's in a nutshell what we're here to offer. We do have some safety products that we can connect you with. It's almost akin to having an AED in your shops that most organizations carry now. If there's a concern, having a first aid kit or a first aid kit for an EV battery might be prudent. We're not here to sell it to you. We're here to share with you what tools there are in the marketplace that we can help facilitate and give you some guidance on. But we're here all afternoon. We can answer and help out with any questions that way. So hopefully it gives you a very quick snapshot on the downstream effects or opportunities and support services that we can provide and help out. If there's any questions later on, please feel free to drop by and talk to Steve or myself.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's always a great time to come in after lunch because everybody's sort of like, ugh. So I have anyone that's ever seen me speak before, I really enjoy this opportunity because we've been working on the EV and emerging technologies projects for over 2 years now. And we're kind of at a point where we're working with our partners in fixed auto and the collision industry in general, but also the mechanical and heavy vehicle. And I'll go into sort of where we're at. But ultimately for us, we feel that there's an obligation and a requirement within these three sectors to really have someone stand out and be able to offer the solutions as it integrated, because as I explain, I'll get into it and explain, there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of fear and a lot of danger in a lot of what's happening. And ultimately for us as an organization, took it upon ourselves to make sure that ultimately we wanted to have a way of working with the different sectors and the different industries to make sure that they had what they needed, both from a training perspective, a tooling perspective, a equipment perspective, but also a support for actually doing the repairs, industry knowledge, application-specific information, access to parts. Our entire EV ecosystem right now is not integrated. Everybody in this room should know that already, and there's a whole bunch of different players that are trying to figure out their solution for it. And it's right from the very beginning of our process and education and all of this, what we found out that everybody in our different sectors is trying to fix or solve the problem that is directly related to their business model. So whether it be towing organizations that have to put them on flatbeds and can't drop them at vehicle facilities that don't have already high voltage training. On the collision side, fixing just the ability to see whether it's safe and then to make the choice whether they actually go into the service. On the mechanical side, it's making sure that the technicians are actually able to work on those vehicles and maintain them as the new age comes of electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles as it's coming. The first two speakers talked a lot about sort of OEs and the implications that it's happening in those industries. What isn't talked a lot about is the traditional and non-traditional OEs, which I'll talk about. So little overview. This presentation was actually put together for the collision industry specifically. We've had this discussion with a couple other groups, both en français and in English. And as we're national, we have an obligation to make sure that all the provincial regulations are aligning. So anybody that knows, obviously, there's a whole evolution of electric vehicles coming. Every OE has a requirement that they must have electric vehicles as a percentage of sales. The Canadian government's put the timeline as 2035. Every vehicle that's sold from a traditional OE into the Canadian market must be zero emissions by 2035. There's a sliding percentage scale to that date, but the Canadian government has set the deadline. The clock is ticking. So at this point now, it's whether we choose to be part of that future or we choose to find and carve out in a niche space where you can be profitable and have an operating business as this tsunami, and it really is that's coming. Context. We're a global company. We're the largest parts supplier in the world. We have operations in Europe, Asia Pac, Canada, US. But when you look at the way that the EV markets are going across the world, right now, you look at it as 13.5% of registrations are XEV. XEV is zero emissions, hybrid emissions, and plug-in hybrid vehicles. Hybrid vehicles in general will dissipate in the next number of years, and they'll all go to zero emissions, which is plug-in hybrid, and ultimately zero emissions, which is pure battery electric. Just so everyone knows, does anybody not know the difference between a hybrid and a plug-in hybrid, how they operate their systems? The difference is very simple. A hybrid true is using the internal combustion engine as the primary and using the electric engine as the subsidiary. In the plug-in hybrid, it's the exact reverse. So that's why all the technologies, when you're talking to the OEs and they're looking at the future, they have to go to plug-in hybrid because ultimately they need to get away from the primary combustion engine. So this operation and this transition has already happened and continues to happen in Europe and other parts of the world. North America is by far the least advanced in what we're doing, minus maybe New Zealand. And I'll explain that. I got a neat story about that. So right now we're still over 13.5% in hybrid, battery hybrid, plug-in hybrid and zero emissions. But in the US, it's not even into 3%. Like the varying speed at which this is happening, people are using the news media, which is based mostly in North America on what's happening in the United States, because that's where the big 5 OEs are really manufacturing out of, and a lot of noise. But if you look at the rest of the world, you realize that the traditional 5 major OEs will only represent maybe 65 to 70% of market share in the next 15 years. They're not talking about it because they don't want to talk about it, because it's a whole other issue in terms of what they're going to do about it. And the reason that market share is going to be eroded, or at least a combination of erosion in their market share and a growth in the overall pie, is because the non-traditional OEs are selling direct to consumers. So it's the Tesla model that is being taken. And I'll give you examples in all sorts. There's companies like VinFast. There are companies like BYD. There are companies like Evo. All these organizations are going to change the landscape of the automotive. This right here is the Canadian 2022 numbers. As you can see, total motor vehicles registered 204,712. 13.5% of those, obviously, that represents 13.5%. In terms of it, everything is regional. It is completely isolated into Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Even though in Ontario, we represent less than 9% of our purchases are zero emission vehicles, it still represents over 35% of all vehicles purchased in that space in the country. So when we talk about Quebec and the Montreal-Quebec City corridor and Lower Vancouver area being leaders, yes, they're 1 in 4 almost. In Vancouver, it's 25% of vehicles sold right now are zero emissions. But the reality is the sheer number is still quite low, even though comparison when you look at Ontario, when it's only like 8-9%, but it is almost over a third of all the vehicles that are purchased in Canada are done in Ontario, which is a huge pent-up demand. And what's driving Quebec and British Columbia is subsidies. In Ontario, we don't have it. We have a conservative government that doesn't support that. That will come through policy change. That will come through pressure. That will come through change of organized government. All of those things will happen in the future. But at the end of the day, there's pent-up demand in Ontario for a whole bunch of different reasons, including OEs can't deliver vehicles. The training isn't there. And this is a big part of why I'm here to talk about, because we in this room are the answer to the OEs being able to supply the vehicles into the marketplace. We are their solution. So when you look at the EVs and you say, okay, what is their sticking point? And we talked about this. I saw some great presentations this morning about sort of electric vehicles and the fears of them and the problems that we're having and the lack of legislation. Like, I'll give you an example. Red Seal in Canada has absolutely zero requirements for an electric vehicle or a technician to understand anything about electric vehicles to work on it. We said that when the first presentation, it was said that, yes, they can work on it without a lot of information. And that is very absolutely true, because you don't actually need any education to work on a high voltage system. You want to touch the red, orange wires, you go right ahead. You don't actually have to have any knowledge of it. But I'm not going to be standing next to you when that technician touches the orange wire. So for me, as an organization that has 25,000 customers across Canada, just in the mechanical industry, not including heavy vehicle and collision, it puts us in a space where it's a massive threat. Because if our customers are unable to do the services into the marketplace, to fix the vehicles, to maintain them, to fix them, to body work on them, and ultimately when we get to class 5 to 8 in the heavy vehicle, whether that be electric or hydrogen fuel cell, that's all to be determined yet. But at the end of the day, we must, as an industry, take this on as a responsibility to deliver the solutions that our shops need in all three of these industries. Because if we don't, you're unable to really develop the solutions because of the sheer magnitude and size of the problem. Because ultimately, we think a lot of people say, okay, it's like the carburetor change of technology. I'm sorry. It is absolutely not like the carburetor and how the change of technology is happening. This is a fundamental change in how our shops will operate, in space requirements, tooling requirements, training requirements, and ultimately, they don't know what they don't know, because I've been doing this for 2 years and I am dumbfounded every 2 weeks on the new stuff that I learn, including the people that I've listened here today. So there isn't anyone that knows everything about this, and this is why it has to be an industry movement, why I'm so excited about the collision industry bringing this together, because ultimately no one facility, no one network, and no one company is going to be able to solve it. The National Highway Transportation Safety Authority in 2012, we're going to go back a little bit, because I'm going to give you some history on how this all transpired and why we're where we are. In 2012, the NHTSA basically took a Chevy Volt, and they slammed a car into her, one of those things, side impacts 3 times, to test what would happen to this vehicle. After that vehicle, they did their tests, they did this, they did that. Ultimately, they didn't know that they had a breach within the high voltage system. So what they did is they just, the knowledge was not there at the time. So what happens is there was a coolant leak into the high voltage system. They thought, okay, we don't even know what that means. So they took it and put it in their yard and on the whole bunch of other vehicles that are broken. This thing had an internal incident, or basically an incident within the high voltage system, melted down and caught fire in the vehicle, took every vehicle out around it as well. This is 2012 by the National Highway Safety Authority. They screwed up. At that point, there was a massive recall on Chevy Volts. At that point, the realization was, this is the undercarriage of that vehicle. This vehicle basically took it upon itself to have an internal issue. And you talk about the battery cells of the original Volt. You can see the left side is the battery, the right side is what was left of it. But the unique part about this is that they didn't even know that this was possible at the time. So they required a tremendous amount of involvement. This here, you can see that the recall, the undercarriage of these vehicles were completely exposed. If you look under that Rivian now, there's a massive plate from front to back, side to side, protecting the undercarriage of that, including the high voltage systems. They originally were not built that way. And that was a massive problem into being able to contain those internal incidents within those battery cells. So they had to go and put sheet metal on these recalls. People were driving their Volts to the dealerships and handing the keys back in saying, there's no way I'm driving this death trap anymore. There is tons of examples when you look at this and you see this vehicle in this taxi. Bonjour is a taxi, EV taxi manufacturer or a supplier in Montreal. I'm going to show you a quick video here and I'll explain why that this was a situation. I don't even know how to start this. Oh, there we go. So this is a situation where you have a vehicle, it's on fire. Many vehicles catch on fire, whether it be in parking lots and highways, whatever the case may be. But when you take this and the fire crews come out, the first responders come out, treating it like a fire. So they bring out their extinguishers, they dismantle the fire, knock it down, ultimately have the ability to, okay, we've cleared that this thing is no longer on fire. Skip ahead. It's going down, it's going down, it's going down. Finally, they get this thing out, okay? So they get this thing out. The fire department leaves. They bring in the tow truck, the flatbed, to take this vehicle out of here. They put it on the flatbed. They take it to a yard. 4 hours have passed. This thing reignites instantly by itself with no warning whatsoever. Fire department has to come back out. No idea how to put this thing safely out. The only benefit that they had was the fact that this thing wasn't within 25 to 30 feet of another vehicle in their yard. This exact incident is what brought into the fact that you really do need 50 feet. So you need to be able to isolate that vehicle up to 50 feet around any building, any vehicle, or any other combustible function product when you bring those things into the yard. Because there's really only two ways to make sure that these things are safe. One, smell, sight, and sound. So we heard a little bit about it earlier. If anyone actually smells, I encourage all of you to go figure out what lithium smells like, because it's a very unique, distinct smell. If your shops, if they understand what that smell is, they'll be able to identify it like that. That's level one. If they see that there's a big dent in the side of the carriage underneath, you need to look more. If you hear the battery going tick, 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 I walk away. So all of these factors are built into this technology, that there's sight, hear, and sound to be able to know whether there's a problem with what's happening. But it's not always, as was previously stated. And that's where ultimately in the end, the idea that you have to have inspections on every single electric vehicle system or high voltage system that comes into a mechanical or collision shop is absolutely mandatory. Like to the point where you should be dropping it in your yard around 50 feet away from everything and just leaving it there for 48 hours, unless you have an actually high voltage trained technician that can tell you. So the other, one of the speakers had said, like, they'll have people come into their facilities to do the check on the safety to make sure that it's okay. That's a viable solution in the short term. But in the big picture, just because one person says it's safe today does not actually necessarily mean it's safe tomorrow, because there are systems that will, as we heard, 6 days later, then they'll have the thermal incident within the battery system. And those happen because of damage, because of all sorts of factors that we can't see. So this is where, when we started researching and finding out about all this, we realized, you know what, there's a massive threat but opportunity here for our industries to be leaders. And this is where we as an organization took it on upon ourselves to create the IP information within our company to be able to offer this to our partners, like the collision industry, because we're not here to push Napa in any way. What we're actually here is to enable the industries that we serve to go and make the business decisions that they need to be profitable. So if you're looking to say, how do I actually certify a shop? We've all talked about training in terms of training if a technician or a worker within a collision facility, painter, whatever the case may be, estimator. But to us, having one shop do it is not the answer. And the ability for you as an independent owner to go find those solutions on the tooling, the training, that not just on the technician side, but actually for the whole facility, you have to go to many different organizations to get that expert advice. And even after that, to put it all together is an extremely costly endeavor. And so for us, it was like, okay, how do we make it simple? One of our true norths in us is how do we make it easy for our customers? Many organizations talk about making it easy for the customers to do business with them. And that is ultimately why we wanted to put the framework in place to be able to say that we as an organization have created the systems, the auditing process, the training systems, the mechanical issues to be able to offer training and opportunities to any customer, whether it be in a mechanical, heavy vehicle, or in collision, to be able to work safely in high voltage systems so they can build their business, they can open up new revenue opportunities, make the decisions when they want to, because ultimately it'll be a different timeline for every organization, but ultimately in the end, every organization is going to need this. I just built a presentation for, I'm flying to Halifax in the first week of September to talk about electric vehicles. And one of the things I showed in that presentation is that currently right now, we're probably at about an adoption of somewhere around 5% of our shops in all our markets and industries have any knowledge to work on electric vehicles or feel that they can. Whether they can or not, they believe they can. The reality is by 2035, that market will be almost 80%. So 80% of facilities in our industries will have the expertise within their facility to do electric vehicles. By the time, say our plan is by 2026, we'll be at somewhere between 30% of our customers. Because right now, I talked about the traditional and non-traditional OEs. I'm gonna kind of just paint a picture and a story for everybody. Right now in Europe, there's many organizations that are selling cars direct to consumer. Those organizations, unlike our traditional OE business, does not have dealer networks. They are in the business of selling cars, building and assembling and selling cars. They are not in the business of aftermarket sales service. And that is where us as an industries have tremendous opportunity outside of the traditional work that we used to do, where we get, I don't know what it is necessarily in collision. Obviously, you can see a vehicle a week after they take it off the lot. But in mechanical, we're usually sitting around 4 to 5 years life cycle of the vehicle before we see it in our shops. The reality is that's changing. For you, you've always been from day one. Mechanical, we're going to start being from day one because we're going to be doing work on vehicles from day one because they don't have facilities and networks to do this work. There's a whole change in the Benelux group that is owned by us in Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. 40% of vehicles sold today are EV direct to consumer that don't have dealership networks. It is a changing game that we don't really see how big it's going to change in North America because we're dominated by the big five. In New Zealand, in the last 18 months, 40% of their vehicles sold used into the New Zealand market are coming from China, and they're used 3 years old hybrid and electric vehicles because policy changed it. Overnight, the New Zealand government said, we're going to give $8,000 subsidy to any vehicle that's less than 4 years old, an EV used coming into our market. Their aftermarket got demolished within about 12 months because not one technician, if you think about it, nobody was ready. And this is where we say we've got years, and people even here I've talked to, like we're probably multiple years. Policy can change everything. And this is where us as an organization looks at it, and you should as business owners, as a problem to your long-term success, as a threat to when you make this investment and how do you actually execute on this investment, because there must be a return on it. But let me tell you, the people that are getting in now, there is no ROI. The ROI is a 5-year plan to be industry leading to capture that, because it's about first mover right now. And I truly, truly believe many things in the aftermarket collision industry and heavy vehicle have never been about first mover. In fact, we've always been, in a lot of cases, late adopters. This is the material change. We must, if you want to have this, there's one chance, in my opinion, to get market share out of this change and fundamental change of the industry. And it is going to happen over the next 18 months. So as people are actually making the investments and seeing the opportunities and pulling the onion back and not listening to many other people saying it's not going to happen, it's going to happen in 5 years, we're not ready. It is happening. And it's happening at a level underneath where we see it right now. And the reality of that is because even organizations in this room are looking for solutions, and huge organizations globally do not have the capacity to do what everybody in this room can do. And ultimately for us as a supplier to people in this industry is a massive opportunity for us, because we want to empower you guys to be able to go make a boatload of money. Average labor rates are 40% higher on electric vehicles than they are on mechanical combustion engines. training into the technician is only between $15,000 and $20,000 to certify a tech long-term from a pure internal combustion engine to an EV certified. And what we do is we don't train them on a Tesla Model 3 of how to change a ball joint. It's about competencies. All of this came out of, we've heard about the Quebec government, unbelievable forethought in that company or that province. Their government has invested tens of millions of dollars in multiple different projects for the sole purpose of getting a return on the investments that they're making in hundreds of millions of dollars in battery recycling, OE production, manufacturing facilities. Those are billion-dollar bets. None of those bets are successful unless the people in this room can fix them, maintain them, and do the body work on those vehicles once they get deployed. So now we looked at it and we said, okay, if you have this massive roadblock and ultimately bottleneck for you to be able to get a return on your investment, and they're big $100 billion investments, they need to engage the aftermarket, the collision industry, the heavy vehicle market, to be able to say, you need the intellectual knowledge to work on these systems because it's material different, but they are unfortunately not able to give us the information and knowledge that they need us to actually know. And that's what's happening through our regulations. Ultimately, you've got a bunch of government bodies, and I appreciate that a lot of people and a lot of smart people are doing a lot of amazing work. But the reality is the regulation process is far behind the applications that are needed today. And the training that we're going to get from the government and the regulation bodies, we will have something within a year, 18 months, and they'll say that this has to happen and this is the way we're going. And we're working with organizations to do this. It's not like we're doing this in isolation with organizations like CSA. And I know they're an organization that's trying to come up with not the regulations, but the standards to the regulations. Because we don't even have the standards to actually train to the regulations. So how do you create a service and an actual training component with the content that you're 100% sure that is going to be the best? And that was one of our major sticking points to this and the deployment of everything that we're doing for the industry. And we've spent literally a year and a half trying to get to this point. And I'm happy to chat with anyone. This isn't a sales pitch. It's really to make sure that people understand, like we talk about technicians, but even in the collision side, what about the estimators? What about on the mechanical side, the service advisors? What about the salespeople that are going into these facilities to talk about this technology? What about the owners that really don't understand what their own people are telling them on this technology that they need to invest in? All of that knowledge exists. We just need to package it in a way that is best for you to absorb it and benefit from it in the shortest time possible. And that's not going to get fixed overnight, and that's not going to be fixed by NAPA. That's going to be fixed by NAPA working with collision industries and large organizations through LKQ and Fix-It Network and manufacturers and deployment of a lot of different resources just in the collision side. I mean, the collision side is a massive undertaking in itself, but when you layer on mechanical and heavy vehicle, it becomes an enormous mountain. And that's why and we're going to have a lot of stuff to support this that's coming out in the coming weeks and months. But ultimately, to know that we're doing this for one very specific reason, and that is to make sure that the people in this room feel supported in being able to deliver on what your consumers are going to demand basically tomorrow when you see one of those vehicles. And the last time, and I'll leave you with the fact that we had a service advisor that called me up and almost in tears and said, Martin, I get what you said, because she made a mistake, completely mistake, by saying, oh, well, let's look up the next time your oil change is due by your odometer, because that's what she did every single day for an internal combustion engine customer. But then as soon as she got her first EV in, she just doing the same thing. The terminology is different. The mentality is different. The customer expectation is different. And who's going to train your people to do that? Where are you going to get the knowledge to do that? How are we going to compile that in a way that makes sense as an industry? So those are the things that are happening as we speak. And I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up in terms of specifics. But we as an organization are trying to work with all as an industry to make sure you have that, and including the college systems. We've spoken to many deans. In fact, Alan and I have had multiple conversations about this space exactly as well. So thank you very much. I'm here. I'm happy to share anything you would like and answer any questions you have, because it is one space that I think that you should grab onto, learn about it, understand it, and find the opportunity specifically for yourself short-term, but also long-term.
We're going to look at major disruptions, no matter what happens.
it's hard to predict, and we can debate how fast they're going to happen, when we're going to hit the tipping point, whether we're at the tipping point now or just before it, and then a lot of the issues, whether it comes from high voltage safety, whether it comes from batteries, whether it comes from just the ability to get vehicles repaired that aren't working or are damaged. There's going to be a lot of change that we're going to see. And that change can be frightening, but at the end, some people have talked about it as an opportunity. Some people have talked about it as a competitive advantage for those. But I'm going to talk from a perspective of just workforce development, skills development, training, supply of people to do the work. And that's where my expertise is. I started as a technician, but then I've spent about 20 years in the college system in 2 different provinces in BC, in Ontario, managing education and trades training, and then spent about a dozen years in corporate automotive training, in designing training systems and managing training. And so with that expertise, I'll try to talk a little bit about the big picture and try to talk a little bit about some of the things that colleges are doing. Because Centennial College, we've got about, in transportation programs, we've got about 1,500 automotive technicians at any given time, somewhere between 120 and 160 collision repair students at any given time, and about 3,000, probably not quite 2,800 students in all of our transportation programs at any given time. And so we're involved with lots of different employers and lots of sectors in transportation. And so it's been talked about new players, new approaches. I spent a good chunk of my career working with OEMs. I spent then another chunk of it consulting, supporting OEMs when they needed extra capacity and help to set up programs. And so I have a really good OEM perspective, and I've worked in the aftermarket sector as well. And the one thing I'll say for sure is I haven't got a crystal ball for the future, but there is absolutely no way the OEMs can maintain, repair, and service all of the vehicles that are in operation. It's never happened. I don't see it happening moving forward. If we look at jurisdictions that are further ahead, and one of the benefits we have in Ontario that some people may say from a climate change standpoint is really a deficit, not an asset, but one of the benefits we have is we can look to other jurisdictions that are further ahead of us around the world. And it's a disaster in some places when you take a look at cars lined up because they can't get the parts, they can't get the components, the customer is in a rental or in a loaner, and the vehicle just sits. The OEs don't have the capacity, and as we've heard from some, new players in the game don't even look at maintaining that network. And so I've mentioned a few others, but not just different approaches in how to do business, but totally different approaches to how to build cars. So Tesla was probably the first one we saw took a real tech company approach to how they were going to build vehicles. You got Polestar, you've got VinFast, you've got Zinger. Project Aero was a demonstration project in Canada that showed that with $3.5 million of seed money from the federal government, they created a distributed design and manufacturing system for a connected autonomous electric vehicle. And that is not going to go into production. You're not going to see Project Aero vehicles in your shop, but they did that to show the capacity here in Canada. And they did everything, I think, except the screens on Project Aero was built and designed in Canada. They brought that to completion in about a year and a half to 2 years with about $3.5 million. And what that shows us is that people around the world will come up with ways without having foundries, without having stamping plants, without having all of the control over their supply chain and the design. That's likely to happen elsewhere and is starting. Zinger is a supercar built, and all of the major components are 3D printed. They've been talking about Industry 4.0 for some time now. So the technology is there to have different ways of building the parts, different ways of assembling the vehicles.
Multimatic in Newmarket, probably about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, they built as a demonstration project. It was applied research, but they built an entire shell for a minivan, a body out of composite carbon fiber. So there's going to be new materials, new ways of construction. And so the electric drive system is just a start. We're going to see a lot of disruption moving forward. And so I've talked about additive manufacturing. I've talked about composites, wide variety of metals and steels you're getting used to, and you've had that for quite some time. And then precision measuring for all of the sensors, all of the cameras, for ADAS systems. Things need to be exact. They can't be close anymore. It's not about how the vehicle drives, how the vehicle tracks, whether you can adjust the suspension, the alignment. It's all about how effective are the precision measuring systems set up that are predicting where the vehicle, what's ahead of the vehicle, what's in its way, how it's going to safely change course. Mass reducing approaches as well means we're probably going to see a lot of other new materials and new ways of building things. And it's been mentioned, the whole new approach is more like a tech company. Apple wants you to buy the iPhone they build today, and they want you to buy their next one. Whether or not someone can fix that quickly when it doesn't work right and get that back to the customer is not their primary concern. And so a lot of the new companies are taking almost a tech company approach. It's all focused on building the product, getting the product out to market. And the difficulty, especially your sector faces, is that car could be the very first one off the line, the very first one over the curb, get into an accident, and someone has to fix that. And so that makes things really challenging for you in how you're going to do that. For those of you especially that are working, whether it's the insurance adjusters, whether it's new car dealers that you're providing the support to. And there's no easy solution to this, and so I'll talk about a few of the considerations. Skill and labor. We're facing a shortage of people right now, and I, in a community college, knows it better than anyone else. The numbers of children coming out of grade 12 today are less than they were a couple of years ago, and next year they'll be less than they are today. We're on a demographic downward trend of direct entry students that are leaving high school looking for careers and looking for where they want to take their post-secondary education or where they want to invest their training dollars. And so the challenge that we have is it's going to be harder and harder to find people to do the work, and we need higher and higher skill levels or broader skill levels with the new work that's going to be done. There was a study in BC, and this says electrification and automation of the BC automotive aftermarket service sector, labor market research. If you Google that, you'll see you can download the highlights of that study, or you can download the entire thing and read through it. But I'll talk to just a few things that they have in their findings and their recommendations. And the one thing they said is they talked about all of the new technologies. They didn't just talk about EV or electrification. They talked about advanced driver assist systems. They talked about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles after. They talked about a variety of new technologies. And the one thing they said was ZEV has the largest impact. And so that's the biggest one that's going to hit everybody the hardest. Attracting people to the industry with tight labor market and a poor sector image. That's a really tough one because there's a shortage of everything right now. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, trades and sectors like yours, sectors like automotive service technician, like heavy vehicle maintenance and repair, those were seen as really good career options because you didn't have to pay for 4 years of university and you'd get a good job out of it and a good career. I'm a good example of that. I'm one of 4 brothers. I've got 3 trade licenses. I came back to Canada in the middle of the early 90s recession after I worked in the South Pacific for a few years. Everywhere I went, people wanted to hire me as a heavy equipment Caterpillar mechanic and truck mechanic. It didn't matter where I went, anywhere there was work to do. I came back in the middle of the recession had a job within 2 days. My older brother, who is a computer programmer, he went into the computer sector. He was told that was the wave of the future. He'd been out of work for 6 months. He was out of work a year in that stretch. He then was out of work the next downturn. And so trades were seen as really good options, but that what we face today is that when everyone's hiring, when everyone's looking for people, is the stigma and the bias against trades going to cause our young people to gravitate to something else because they don't understand how exciting the work is, how great the opportunities are. I've got a brother who's an engineer. I've got a brother who's a certified professional accountant, a CFO of a company. I've got a brother who's a computer programmer analyst. And I made the same money as the engineer through my entire career. He works in the nuclear power sector. He's worked for OPG. He's worked for AECL. He's traveled around the world. I've traveled around the world, province to province, always had the same income as him, never been without work. People don't understand that. What they don't understand about collision repair is that it used to be looked upon as the easier one to go through, the one that was more physical, the one that was dirtier. But you take a look at flat rate times, you take a look at the advanced procedures and processes, you take a look at the skills. And the collision sector right now, if someone's asking me and looking and saying, where are the jobs, where are the opportunities, collision and probably truck coach are the two I can say, well, they're all good. But here's two that you'll have very little competition. The only competition you'll find are the employers that want to hire you, because it's a great career. We've got a pre-apprenticeship program that we run with Tropicana Youth Services, and people go into industry and they have opportunities that just blow their mind. They never imagined how good things are. But if you're outside, you look at it as just beating panels and painting cars. And so we've got work to do, because we've really got to attract young people. And it's not just collision, it's automotive service, it's truck and coach, it's heavy duty, it's construction trades. Trades are great. And so what I'll say is attracting young people into industry, if we don't have enough now and they're retiring in droves, what on earth are we going to do? And so if we take a look at changes in policy, immigration policy changes, opportunities to put new Canadians right into apprenticeships, feed them into where the work is. I think what we've got to do is have a really better alignment with who comes into Canada and what they're looking to get into as far as a career goes, and have programs that provide that training. One of the things in the skills and labor considerations for this study was more frequent training needed. One thing I'll say that's a real positive is in 30 years of being involved in this, in fact, it's 40 years I've been involved in motive power trades, but in 30 years involved in vocational training in the public and private sectors, I've never seen the focus on trades and apprenticeship that I see today, and the investments in it. And so we certainly have at the provincial government level, at the federal government level, a real conscious effort to work with the different stakeholders and attract more people. And so I think the next one, and I'll just undo the next slide. This is some of the highlights out of the study. If you take a look at the 1, 2, 3 over is auto body and collision. Second over is automotive service technician. You're seeing a convergence in skills that are needed, especially with the ADAS systems, especially when you get into the new drive systems, the new technologies. The overlap in those skills, and whether you're working with a shop that has 310Ss, whether you're looking and saying there's enough work in the future that you're going to take that more and more of that work on, there's certainly an overlap in skills. Certainly when you look at battery removal, battery storage and shipping, battery testing and repair, that all speaks to the skills and the training that Martin's talked about. Electrical ability to use machines, and then you get into the advanced skills. And this applies to trades across the board in the future. Being able to work with computer diagnostic systems, software in programming and reprogramming and registering parts. Cybersecurity is huge. Wireless data communication. Then you get down into data literacy. The one thing I'll say is the next generation coming through is much more digitally literate. They're much more tech savvy. And so as my generation's leaving, and as some of you around it that are around the same age as me as you're leaving, the newer people coming in have grown up in a world where technology is constantly changing. The key is, though, is we've got to attract the right young people. The streaming that takes place in high schools where people are encouraged because they're at risk and they're encouraged to take OEAP and take trades programs, those aren't the learners that really have the skills that the future needs in the trades. We need people who are looking at engineering, are looking at business programs, are looking at other programs at IT. Those are the ones that are going to do really well in trades. And so that's something to consider. I'm not going to spend a lot on high voltage and EV systems. Most of the colleges around offer programs. We don't focus on entire systems. We focus on what the learners need. And for us, it's technician upgrading. It's students in our 2-year post-secondary programs. The apprenticeship curriculum lags. That's a challenge. And that's something you can help with when it's the next Red Seal study for upgrading the standards for your trades that you have. And so they listen to employers, and employers technically talk about their problems today. They don't talk about their problems tomorrow and what they see tomorrow. And so as much as everyone talks to me about how antiquated the curriculum is, industry has a large part in where that goes. They have a large voice. And so the more you can speak up and get involved when curriculum is upgraded in the apprenticeship system, the more it'll reflect where things are going tomorrow. And so there's lots of training options right now, but we're just at the start. And high voltage is just the beginning. So we do high voltage. After high voltage, we have modules on batteries, inverters, charging systems in our program that we have with TTC, where we're adopting it and changing it so that it's bus specific. Most of what we're doing right now, though, is on light and medium duty vehicles, and we've been delivering our modules for about a year now. Canada Post, we're seeing more with public fleets. You may see more of these new technologies with public fleets with policy changes. And as public fleets start to buy more and more zero emission vehicles, if I look at where we are right now, City of Brampton, City of Mississauga, City of Toronto, they're going to be buying vehicles because their policies are going to favor or require EVs, which means somebody's got to fix those right away. And so we're seeing them first in a lot of the requests for training for us. Keeping up to date with industry requirements. There's not much I can do to help you with equipment because the equipment, you've got to look at your return on investment. You've got to look at where your business is. And I see a lot of change. We're just into a churn or into a start right now. But as companies evolve, as new ways of doing things come in, we're going to see change. And there's no question that the mindset we have with the big five is going to at least provide some more traditional methods and ways of doing things that will still lead to the regular work that you've been doing. But the work that's different and the ways that are different, that's going to grow. There's no question about that. And to what extent that takes over or pushes some of the big five right out of business further on down the road, who knows? I think one thing to be aware of is I think you're going to see hydrogen fuel cells faster than most people think because the petrochemical industry has jumped in it with both feet. And now that they look at probably the first generation of hydrogen supply is probably going to be based on natural gas. That's going to at least create a distribution network, and that's the only thing that's holding back hydrogen fuel cells right now is access to hydrogen. And so I've talked about different investments you have to make in precision measuring, and we've got some people here today that are demonstrating some of theirs. One of the real opportunities, I guess, is partnering up with the OEMs who have no intentions of having their own shops, because a lot of them have certifications, but it's not just certifications. If you don't go to their training and meet their certifications, you can't buy major components or parts. And that's going to be, that's an opportunity here. And I've just highlighted one owner that invested in a variety of them. You see the plaques on the wall, but it's not easy. They had to send a technician down to Virginia for Volkswagen Audi training to become certified. And so it's in aligning with them, though. Maybe what you can do is become a center for a whole host of dealers in that area or that region. And so I think partnering with the dealerships, not just on becoming certified on the body side, but on the mechanical side, on the electronic side, is certainly something that your sector's been doing that for a long time now. And looking at where that handoff is a business decision to make, because at the point in time where you're going to be doing enough of it yourself, it might be capacity you decide to take on yourself. And so in dealerships and independents, I think I'm going to skip right to, I think, parts supply challenges and right to repair. And so I don't see the parts supply challenges easing up for a while right now. The disruptions that we saw that start with COVID, I think that disruption is still rippling through. So getting the components in a timely manner it's unacceptable right now. There's cars that you can't repair or vehicles that you can't repair. The customers are left either driving them or having them parked with a loaner for extended periods of time. And I think that may be fixed by Industry 4.0 as we start to use new methods of having parts made in smaller quantities closer to the market. But it may not be. And so I can't give you any insight there, but it currently is a challenge right now, especially when you get into batteries, whether you get into semiconductors, wiring harnesses, and that may impact the rate at which these new technologies and EVs are adopted and come in, because everyone's got aggressive targets with how fast it's going to go. But there's major challenges when it comes to vehicle production, parts supply globally, and demand globally around there. And so how fast we're going to see that, I don't know. But as far as some of the solutions, we had somebody come in to Centennial and do some PD from Spain, and they run an independent shop in Spain, and people are shipping them vehicles from England because one example, Range Rover, it needed a drive motor. Range Rover couldn't supply it. The 90 days that I think they told the customer had already lapsed. The customer took a vehicle and heard about this person in Spain that rebuilt the motor, sent it back to England because they just didn't want to wait any longer. And the repair bill wasn't even that high. If we see the parts issues again and again slowing things down enough, there'll be, just like we talked about battery recyclers, there'll be people who figure this stuff out and come up with ways to solve it. And at the end, especially when you have a mindset with the newer companies, they just want to sell the vehicle, they're okay with that if somebody else finds ways of building components or rebuilding components to keep the vehicles running. And so I think when it comes down to right to repair, I can't think of a time where that's more important than any others, because right now, right to repair is huge and it's completely unacceptable. I look at what's happening in the States with state to state, and I think federally, I take a look, there's an obligation. Now that there's zero emissions, OBD2 drove all of this from an emissions standpoint. But once we have vehicles that have no emissions, we've seen what a lot of manufacturers have done with backing away from supporting their customers and supporting those vehicles once they're in service. And so the only thing you can do there is whether it's you, whether it's your customers, whether it's the industry associations with a strong voice, whether it's the insurance companies that are covering higher and higher losses, right to repair's got to be sorted out, because at the end of the day, that one, along with, I hadn't even thought about it, Mark, till you mentioned it, but that one along with the IP and who owns what, because somebody's saying, no, I've sold you the vehicle, but you've really got a license for all the software on that car while you're driving it around, so you don't have the right to make any changes to it. We got to sort that one out as well, because some of them are using some interesting ways of trying to maintain control of something that they can't provide the basic level of service to keep it going. And I've got nothing against manufacturers. I just think customers are entitled to make choices. And so I think that's a fundamental right that we as consumers have, whether it's a washing machine, a cell phone, or a vehicle. And so I think I'm just about at the end right now, and I keep hitting the wrong button here. And so not all's doom and gloom though. Industry's got a long history of adapting. You're all problem solvers. All of your technicians are problem solvers. I think working collectively and collaboratively is probably going to be where some of these challenges are sorted out. Training is where some of these, and investing, because I come from an industry that doesn't have a history on the AST side in the aftermarket of doing an awful lot of training. And so I think more training. The younger generation is a little more savvy with technology and adaptable. And I think supply chains, will eventually balance. But I think the customers and insurers have got to be running out of patience now. And the other thing is we're going to see is the slower uptake in Ontario lets us see how some of these issues are played out and solved in other jurisdictions. And so that is, I think, it for my discussion. On the Red Seal side, for the apprenticeship training, that is one that we've got two types of programs that the college system typically runs across Canada, and they're typically programs that are full-time pre-apprenticeship programs or diploma and certificate programs. And then we have apprenticeship programs where people are already employed. They're learning their different levels of apprenticeship as they go back and forth between school and work. And I think if I look at the apprenticeship system, we have to follow what the standards are. And that's where you have the ability to say to the whether it's Skilled Trades Ontario, here in Ontario, whether it's on Red Seal working groups, you have the ability to say, this is what we want to see our next generation trained in or receive in their education. The full-time programs we run in 1 and 2 year programs, and I can speak to collision repair. We've got a 1 year and a 2 year program, but we do the same in automotive and truck and coach and heavy duty. In those programs, we're embedding EV training, high voltage safety and awareness training in every single program. So the students that go through from the get-go are going to be exposed to electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, the concepts related to this. We're not going to be taking them in a program before their apprenticeship to a level where I'd say they're fully competent. That's part of what they get when they go into your workplace and continue to learn on the job. But we're certainly providing a foundation and have more flexibility there. It's in the apprenticeship that we're tied to what that ministry curriculum is, province to province. And I think that's about it. I welcome any questions. I thank you for the opportunity to speak here. All of us in transportation tend to be very passionate about it. We love technology. We love what we do. We love vehicles. And I can't think of a more exciting time to be in this sector, because this change is really going to make those that embrace it do very well, because moving people and moving goods is going to be a huge driver in the economy for generations to come, that's for sure.